Yeah, I listened to the podcast and I thought it was pretty interesting actually. The reaction you got to the Pope Francis.
Oh, yeah.
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 So I'm guessing that's what inspired you to create that.
Well, that was actually an audio prototype I had already wanted. So I actually had thought of this before I even knew what deepfakes were. It kind of came from the beginning of Reckonings. I've had this wish list of guests. The idea being like, okay, when we think about broad-based social change, we think of social movements like the civil rights movement. We think of social change requires large numbers of people pushing for change. But the question kind of, occurs like, well, who are the fewest number of people that if they had some kind of a reckoning or crisis of conscience, or if they had some kind of a personal transformation that would actually result in broad-based social change. If Charles Koch had a reckoning, like that would literally change the climate trajectory of the planet. And so, I've had this wish list of guests, like who are the fewest number of people, Charles Koch, the Pope, etc. And I had this idea of making I didn't even know what I was thinking about. It was like a synthetic film of Charles Koch's transformation and how it ended up, like completely changing the world. And then in 2017, I discovered deepfakes. And it was like, wow, you can actually do this. So, so I had been thinking of it before I even knew that the technology existed. And then when I discovered it, it was like, all right, let's do this. And so I did the Pope episode as just an audio prototype, and then based on the reaction, it was like, okay, I think this thing has legs. Let's actually try to do this with video.
Was it a steep learning curve to kind of get used to?
Oh, I'm not the technical mind behind this. I'm the creative director, scriptwriter, everything else.
was synthetic voice a possibility? Because I've heard some.
It is. It was actually for budgetary. I didn't have. Well, first didn't have it would have cost more to do synthetic audio, but also it's actually legally more just grayer territory. That's still deepfakes. I mean, as you know, probably the legal kind of world around this is like evolving as we speak, right? Like we're just trying to figure out how to put policies around it. And for whatever reason, video, like explicitly marked video, very much falls into the category still of satire and commentary. So that libel is not an issue, but using someone's voice for whatever reason, this is something I learned from a potential distributor, is legally in grayer territory.
That's interesting. So changing their likeness isn't quite as gray.
I don't know. Maybe we're just used to having visual actors look like someone. I'm actually not even totally sure why, but So
that's interesting. Yeah. So my take on your clips was that they seemed to me almost like, I said to you, like an alternate reality where public figures actually take up some moral responsibility. But what's your take on my take?
Well, I think my take on your take. I think that is, well, one, I think it's reasonable because you're kind of just, these videos are just these 4-minute, 5-minute, you're just seeing the fruit, right? You're just like, theoretically, if this were to happen to Zuckerberg, Kavanaugh, or Jones, there would be a months or years long process, right, of coming to terms with what they have, and maybe Alex Jones would have gone through restorative justice dialogues with Sandy Hook families. Mark Zuckerberg would have met with people in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. I mean, there would be a whole process. So understandably, it's kind of hard to believe it. Whereas with Reckonings, at least, you get to kind of hear the arc. You get to hear what happened that got them to the reckoning, right? But this is just the fruit. So understandably, but, I guess, thinking back to Reckonings, I mean, it's possible. You know, all kinds of people. Like if a white supremacist who has like gone almost to the point of murdering people, you know, and I guess this is also just my, like, I have seen all kinds of people make all kinds of transformative change. So I believe in the potential. I believe in the possibility. You know, whether these men in particular, I don't know, but like, you know, I believe it's possible. With all kinds of change, you know, with all kinds of having done all kinds of, you know, from less atrocious to more atrocious. But I guess more specifically with these men in particular, I would say Zuckerberg and Kavanaugh, just to be totally honest, like have little incentive to, like they don't really need to.
Right.
Yet, you know, I think Jones, which is maybe ironic because he was actually the person I was the most scared to do and kind of the most hesitant to do. I like kind of didn't want to, it's like, I don't want to go into the heart of Alex Jones. What am I going to find in there? But he actually has lost the most and therefore has the most to gain. And he might actually be the most, like, I actually think he's the ripest target. He would be the most kind of amenable to having his reckoning in the public spotlight because he's a media, he is a media guy. He wants it in the media. He's a performer. He's an entertainer. And so I guess, you know, in terms of the alternate reality, you know, it doesn't, yeah, like, I guess, yeah, so Zuckerberg and Kavanaugh, maybe less realistic, Jones more realistic, but ultimately, you know, it almost like doesn't totally even matter because this project isn't, that's also why I didn't want to release just one, because I didn't want it to be like just about that person. It's not just about these people, it's also about creating a new way of responding to credible accusations of wrongdoing. We're all like very used to and tired of, I think, the deny and deflect playbook, right? That's what we see in the Trump era. And like my job here, my creative job that I gave to myself is to make another way, a new way that actually looks more manly, you know, more powerful, more beautiful, more sexy than the deny and deflect thing. So part of this is also, it's like, irrespective of these three men, what might it look like to respond to credible accusations of wrongdoing in a totally different and maybe more compelling way?
I see. And what's the response been so far to your video, to these videos?
Oh, well, so I expected the heat from all directions. I expected everything from like, he didn't do anything wrong, you know, all the way to like, why does he deserve to have his apology written for him? All the way to, you know, deepfakes are inherently unethical and should not be used under any circumstances. And I've gotten a little bit, there has certainly been like celebrating this like subversive use of this maligned technology, and there has been it's been mixed, but I think you know, I mean, and the people I most respect, and I don't know if you read Anand's piece. I think I sent it to you, the one in the ink.
Yes, I did,
like the people, yeah. I mean, it's like the people who I feel philosophically aligned with. It's not surprising to me have more of that kind of a response because, you know, they understand where I'm coming from, and there is an excitement around this, you know, the subversive use of this medium, and also just like the scripts themselves. It's like, well, this is a compelling model. I think what is more surprising about the response is someone asked me if I consider myself, or no, it was like they asked me if part of what I want to do as an artist is be provocative or something. I don't remember the exact question, and I was like, well, I actually don't. I'm not really intending to be provocative. I'm actually very thin-skinned, and so it's like the fact that this project is provocative says more about, you know, because we don't want to. It's like we don't want to let these men off the hook. You know, not only let them off the hook, but this does more than let them off the hook. It lets them off the hook and lets them like look good doing it. Like lets them take leadership, or lets them kind of you know, like say things that are wise. And I think that is the fact that that is provocative, like to me, says more about where we are with our in our culture than it says about me trying to be a provocative artist. It's like the fact that it is provocative to like allow the tyrant to be a hero. So that's
that is interesting that you got these range of responses.
Yeah.
Especially to the, when you're dealing with the Alex Jones crowd. I mean, I know every time I write about him, I get like hundreds of like messages. I just stop reading them,
Really?
Yeah, of course. It's just what happens, right?
That's actually how I found you. Listening, because you wrote about the last time he went on Joe Rogan, where Joe Rogan basically tried to like help him have a reckoning, basically. Yeah. And I listened to that first 30 minutes of that episode. I've listened to it so many times, and I find it actually so wild. And I was like, who had noticed this? This to me is nuts. And I found that you wrote about it. And honestly, like, you can hear, I don't know if you listen to the whole, I mean, it's like 5 hours, so I hope you didn't drag yourself through.
I listened to the whole thing.
Okay, well then, yeah. I mean, you hear Alex, he wants to. He just doesn't know how. I honestly, he is hurting, is what I got from that.
Yes, that's one way to look at it. I think he's just been so submerged in this kind of ecosystem for so long.
Exactly. Really that's part of it. He doesn't know how else to be. Yeah, which is part of what I'm trying to do. It's like, you can also be this. This is another option for you.
Well, what do you think of his kind of career trajectory, where he kind of moved away from being an anti-establishment figure into like a very kind of pro-Trump, pro-Republic, just another basic conservative, just a bit more wild?
Honestly, I think he regrets that, and he's actually talked about that, because he was all about not being anyone's puppet, right? Yeah. He stood up to everybody. I think he now regrets, partly because it kind of cornered him in, but also because he loves partly because it cornered him in, but partly because it's like, it's kind of what I wrote for his script, like, partly because it actually doesn't fit with what his original intention was. He kind of like he became a puppet.
To me, it seemed like he was moving towards his audience and settling into his niche and understanding just intuitively what direction he needed to take on certain issues.
I think you're right. But I think I think he let that happen because he ended up prioritizing the like success and entertainment over the like fighting tyranny. And I think he actually regrets it. It ultimately kind of became his downfall. So.
And if he was to have a reckoning similar to the one you've depicted, what do you think the reaction of his crowd would be?
So that's the hardest part. I think that is the hardest part. He would have to be because people, and he says in his script, like, and if you think I'm something, can I quote the imaginary Alex Jones? He says, if you think I'm compromised, then, he says, I need help. And if you think I'm compromised because I'm saying that, then you need help too. He'd have to be really careful, because they would say he's compromised. They would just, he could get attacked. I think he'd have to do it in it would have to be like so kind of sensational, and so like it can't be 180 degrees obviously in the opposite direction. It has to be, like, if this is it's like just a new dimension. It's like, this isn't a 2-dimensional line. This is a 3-dimensional sphere, and I'm going in like he'd have to really bring his followers with him, which I actually think he can do. He can say, check it out. There is a fight to be fought, and I want you to fight it with me. We're just not fighting exactly the right one.
Right. And to me, it's more of Alex Jones and Kavanaugh and even Zuckerberg as well. It's more of like a systemic issue where you can like kind of swap around the head on the snake. You can like say different things, but it won't, like, the circumstances that led to Kavanaugh being entering that position of power, or like Zuckerberg was kind of finding success in pushing certain agendas through Facebook? Was it really them as individuals, or was it kind of the system itself?
Totally, which is part of why Kavanaugh's face morphs into, I don't know if you noticed this, but near the end his face morphs into Louis C.K., Charlie Rose, Bill O'Reilly. It's like, it's any of them, it's all of them.
Right.
Yeah, part of it is also what we're swimming in. They just happen to be, who the head was. But if it wasn't them, it would have been somebody else, and it will be somebody else. It already is,
Yeah.
So, I totally agree with you.
And was some of the criticism towards your deepfakes was that you were paying more attention to the perpetrators rather than the victims? Or
No, but that's also because that is often... No, I think there's enough of that, I guess, out there. I think maybe. And I think people are still fascinated by the question of why did they do that? Right. I mean, and certainly the victim, as I've just per, episodes I've done involving restorative justice, that is actually a huge question for the victim or for the survivor is why did they do that?
Right. And but I think it's also interesting that one of the responses to you was that deepfakes just shouldn't be used ever. What did you think of that?
I'm not a technological determinist, so to me that is a very simplistic, way of understanding. Like, I don't think we can say that a technology is inherently anything.
Right.
Different technologies have different affordances, and so, like, you can use the internet for a million gazillion more things than you can use a nuclear bomb, but like, so some technologies have more limited use than others, but they're all influenced by the social context in which they exist, so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting because I think this is the first deepfake I've seen that's trying to have a positive impact. I mean, I see it sometimes being used for to be funny, memes and stuff like that. But yeah. What do you foresee other more creative and positive?
Yes, absolutely, and that's part of what I'm trying to do here. A lot of the quote unquote deepfakes for good, most of them, of which there are not many, but most of them use deepfakes to warn about the dangers of deepfakes, right? It's like the Jordan Peele, Obama. And for me, it's like there's got to be more potential here, right? Than using the medium to warn about the danger of the medium. And I mean, I see it more I see a connection to virtual reality therapy, right? We can use, just because a virtual experience is not real doesn't mean it can't help heal me from PTSD. We can use these fictional experiences or media in order to serve us in all kinds of ways. And I actually do see potential in deepfakes for healing. Imagine my husband happens to be in addiction medicine, so I imagine working with your patient to make a deepfake of their sober self in the future, talking to themselves now, helping themselves on the path to recovery. I think there's all kinds of things that we can do, and that was the one intention of the project is to make this other model, make critical self-reflection look beautiful, basically, and then the other, or make more room for us to grow and change in public, and the other intention is to kind of expand the possibility space of the deepfake medium, to kind of carve out how we can use this medium in ethical and benevolent ways, which I totally believe we can.
Yeah, I think it's important not to just let it become the domain of pornographers and people pushing misinformation. Although, as the technology becomes cheaper and more widespread, do you see it accelerating the misinformation problem we already have, or do you think people will kind of adapt?
I do, and we absolutely need to adapt because, and by adapt, I mean we actually need to, I would even say, evolve our relationship with truth to be totally honest. Like, this is an epistemological crisis. Even if we were to, like, eliminate all deepfakes, the post-truth moment is not solved. So, you know, we need to, like, we need, like, a new enlightenment as far as I'm concerned, which, you know, the first enlightenment was like from superstition and magic and irrationality to rationality and science and reason. And this, and in this next one, I think we actually need to make room for, you know, using fiction in purposeful ways, like knowing that, like the virtual reality therapy, it's like, yes, truth, great, and sometimes we actually need fiction, or sometimes we sometimes we need to admit uncertainty. I think we've truth, capital T, has obviously taken us incredibly far, and it's not we just need to acknowledge when the situation is not capital T, when it's a lowercase t. Like, we don't have total certainty around COVID and around all kinds of things. And the more that we pretend that it's capital T true, you know, the more people are going to run to conspiracy theories, because they can smell that that's not actually the case, and they're right.
Right.
So, I think both. More, you know, things are going to get dark, and I think we absolutely need to, like, adapt, like, grow.
Yeah, for sure. You described this as a kind of post-truth era. Do you think there ever was a kind of a truth era?
A truth era?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's what we're coming out of, and, like, struggling. It's like these are the birthing pains. Yeah, like, directly post-Enlightenment till the last 30 years, till, like, I guess the emergence of, if we're going to kind of, like, maybe postmodernism, was the truth era. You know, when it was like, it was enough to say, trust me because I'm Walter Cronkite, or trust me because I'm a scientist at an elite institution. That was the truth era. People would say, okay. And now that's not good enough anymore.
And see, these three figures, Jones and Kavanaugh and Zuckerberg, I think depending on who you ask, some people are not going to believe that they've done anything wrong whatsoever. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you show them. What's your kind of take on that? Maybe for some people it's never going to be about the facts, it's more going to be about who's validating my worldview, or something's wrong and I can't figure out why, and I'm going to choose these answers.
You mean motivated cognition? Like, what do we do about the fact that people just believe which is why, by the way, most Reckonings episodes, there's, I think, one out of, like, 30 who changed his views based on information. One.
Yeah.
Because most of the time we only trust information that confirms what we already believe, right? It's just exactly what you're saying. I mean, that's part of why I think we do need to evolve here, like, epistemologically, because that is the case, right? And so if information isn't always going to get us there, what will? Well, like, speaking to people where they're at, like, all kinds of other things, like speaking to people's values, you know, like, we're not going to, I can, like, give you a nerdier answer. I don't know if,
go for it. Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the phenomenon of postnormal science?
No. What is that?
Okay, this is great. This is a philosophy of science. It's a framework basically for how to build public consensus around science, which we are having a very hard time doing these days, as you know. And the framework, it's very simple. It's just like when uncertainty or stakes are low, normal applied science is all we need. Like, just like scientists in their ivory tower doing their own thing, peer-reviewed process, you know, and then just, like, showing their results to the public, you know. And I don't know what kind of science does that apply to? Like, studying insect legs. I have no idea, but something where uncertainty is very low and the stakes are very low. As uncertainty gets higher, or stakes get higher, you enter the realm of what's called professional consultancy. And there, instead of just scientists, you need to also consult other professionals like doctors or engineers, and have them, you know, be part of producing the science around that topic. And then as uncertainty and stakes get high, that's when you're in post-normal science territory, which is when you actually need to engage the public in producing the science in order for them to trust the results. So that's climate change, that's vaccines, that's genetically modified, or that's all the stuff that we cannot agree on because uncertainty and or stakes are high. So what do we do when people don't trust information? Well, you need to democratize the process of producing the information, or of course no one's going to trust the results. And I mean, I do think that if more climate scientists had spent more time like talking to farmers who had lost crops because the weather had, or people who had experienced floods, instead of like measuring ice cores in Antarctica, I actually think we'd be in a different political place with climate change. So
possibly. Possibly.
Yeah.
And are you still working on deepfake technology? Are you going to continue this art project?
I mean, I actually would love to. I would love to. Yeah, I would love to take it, and I mean, yeah, I have ideas for different. I want to make it real. I want to like get Alex Jones. I do want to. I do want to experiment with synthetic media for healing. Like what I mentioned for addiction. There are definitely other directions I would love to go in. It's hard because your traditional funder does not want to go near this technology with like a 10-foot pole. So it actually took me a while. The reason it took me so long, I mean, thinking of this in 2017, it didn't come out till 2020. It took me a while to find the right funder. And, it's not surprising to me that the right funder was Mozilla, comes from technology, and they are not scared of like interrogating this medium. But yeah, this is your traditional funder doesn't want to touch deepfakes, especially not right now.
No, and do you think that's a big mistake to just kind of leave it all to the...
I mean, I do. You're right. You're like leaving it all to the rogue actors who are, it's like 96% of deepfakes online are involuntary pornography. Like, are you sure that that's So, yeah. But you know what? This is also the case with media. I've actually had a hard time. I mean, this is like partly why I was like badgering you. I've had a hard time. Yeah, like even more mainstream media outlets I think are also scared to go near this story because they don't want to be the one to say, "Hey, wait, here's a different use of deepfakes." It's safer to just be like, "Deepfakes are dangerous. What are we going to do about them?"
Yeah, which is kind of it's a bit late already. It's kind of you can't. I don't think.
Oh yeah, the cat's out of the bag. First of all, and second of all, like that doesn't. Both and like deepfakes are dangerous. What are we going to do about them? And what could we do with them? And like this problem is bigger than deepfakes. So, can we have a bigger conversation too?
Yeah, I think the problem is a lot bigger than deepfakes. Actually, I don't think footage matters so much as people making personal connections with someone that they like online, an influencer, someone like Alex Jones, or maybe somebody smaller, an Instagrammer or whatever, and just kind of listening to what they have to say because they like them. And that might be pushing in misinformation. Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be high tech. It's like...
No, it doesn't, no.
Oh, yeah. We can do all kinds of damage already. We are, so yeah.
And, I think you've pretty much already answered this, but I'm just going to a clearer answer. But how do you think deepfake tech and other tech will help us navigate through this kind of era where we're so oversaturated with information that it's very difficult to determine what is true or possible?
Yeah, no, I actually think that there's a kind of wild and ironic way in which deepfake can help us, does help us navigate through this post-truth moment because it allows us to kind of see that truth is not just an end in itself. It's also a means to an end, and sometimes not the best means to the end. Like sometimes non-truth, sometimes fiction, sometimes like deliberate fiction. Like like with the virtual reality therapy is actually what we need in order to achieve the goal. So in like an ironic way, I actually think these technologies can help us kind of like I mean, I don't know how like evolve our relationship with truth in a way that will help definitely like help us navigate through and out of this post-truth moment into like what would I call the next moment? It would be like I guess it's kind of equivalent to post-normal science. It's like the post-normal science framework asks, the question it's asking is, under what circumstances do we need what kind of science? And I guess there's a similar, like, under what circumstances do we need what kind of truth? Or do we even need truth at all? And I think these technologies help us ask that question. If we would just, like, relax our grip for a second, on the idea that, like, they are inherently unethical or whatever, I think they can help us.
And what would do you think the best way to put a kind of friendly face on deepfakes would be to present it always as a fiction instead of going down like a kind of deceitful?
Yeah, that is where. So I'm gonna give you two answers. Yeah. One is yes. Because, and that's where I draw the ethical line myself is you can draw all kinds of ethical boundaries. It's like, do you have consent of the protagonist? Like, what is the intention of the piece? But I think the easiest and clearest ethical line to draw is it explicit about the fact that it's fake?
Yeah.
And for me, that's, however, this is like the blasphemous thing that I'm not allowed to say. The thing I'm not allowed to say is like, well, what if Alex Jones pretending that his deepfake was real, right? Like at the end of the video. Do you remember how the video ends?
No, refresh my memory.
So Alex, at the end, so all of a sudden he's like, so what do I do with this video? And Joe Rogan is like, well, why don't you pretend that it's real? And Alex goes, well, that's crazy. And Joe Rogan is like, you think that's crazy? Which is obviously ridiculous because Alex Jones thinking it's crazy to pretend that something fake is real, like, haha, that's hysterical.
Yeah.
And then Joe Rogan is like, well, why don't you come and do the real version on my show? And Alex is like, well, but like, so what if though, like, him pretending that the video was real actually helped him stop broadcasting lies more than acknowledging that it was fake? Would we like sacrifice Alex Jones having this transformation for the sake of like making sure everyone knows that this video is fake? That's where truth comes into conflict with other values we have. Like, are we gonna sacrifice truth for like this kind of whatever we call it, social progress? Like, so. I kind of I do draw the ethical line around making it explicit that it's fake, but like, what if not doing that was actually more like socially valuable? I don't know. Right. So I'm just willing to I'm willing at least to entertain that and to say it's not as black and white, even like, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not so simple. Yeah, that is interesting. Do you ever see us getting to the point where deepfakes do become indistinguishable from real footage, or do you think that it's always going to be a bit off?
I think they probably will. I don't know. I think they will. I think they kind of already have. Or at least other things that we can fake already have, like just voices. So, yeah, even there, I don't know. It's like we have always co-evolved with the stories we tell about ourselves. It's just that the stories have gotten more higher bandwidth.
Yeah, it's kind of like CGI, and like you can spot bad CGI, from a few years ago that you wouldn't have been able to before necessarily, and maybe our kids will be able to tell us what is deepfake.
Yeah, well, and I think that'll maybe become, again, like, this is the blasphemous thing to say, but that will become less of the defining, like, truth will be, it'll be less like, is it true or not, and more like, is it helpful or not?
Right.
Yeah.
So personally, I see deepfake really kind of flourishing over in the kind of meme space, and I think memes can maybe be kind of a helpful, empathetic tool, because I think a lot of the time memes can just kind of be like, hey, you know that weird feeling that you have, or that sad feeling you have, everyone else feels it as well, and memes are really good for kind of pushing that out there. And
yeah.
do you see the deepfake kind of just flourishing in that space, or do you see it being used in other areas?
Oh, I guess, yeah, all over the place. I mean, it's, and, you know, entertainment, health and medical, social change, education. I mean, you know, it's like any other, I think, like, you know, any other kind of, yeah, I guess just like tool or medium, it'll find its uses, you know, in I think like most domains of human activity. But yeah, memes. I mean, I have like a personal fascination with memes,
Yeah.
so I'd be curious to see what people do there.
Yeah, I think turning this technology into a plaything will make it maybe kind of lose some of the dangerous edge that it has.
Yes, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. Yeah, totally.